This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Let's jump back to a little trading blast from the past. Well, one of these episodes not that long ago, one of these episodes a little bit of time ago, back to my early first year. 2 episodes today, both the trading author, Alexander Elder, one of my more favorite guests, a very fun, interesting, smart guy. No big lead in, no big story or setup. If you don't know Alexander Elder, if you've not read his books, there's probably something wrong with you. Without any further delay, let's jump right into a double episode with Alexander Elder. Today on the show, I have Alexander Elder, Dr. Alexander Elder. And Dr. Elder, for those that are in the trading world, they've seen his name, they've seen his books, international bestseller, trading for a living. I think just about everybody that's been involved in the trading space in the last 15 plus years has that book on their shelf. So Dr. Elder, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
So I have to say, just as a little family history here, and I'm going to let you tell your story a little bit, but my last name is Covel.
Which means what do you call it? A Smith. It's a Slavic name.
Okay, but it's shortened from Kovaleski, shortened from Kavialauskis.
Yeah.
So it's Lithuanian.
Yeah.
So we're kissing cousins, so to speak, with your Estonian background.
Well, not really, because
No?
I come Estonia and Lithuania, even though they're very close to each other, maybe 100 miles apart, come from completely different ethnic backgrounds. Estonians, I'm not an Estonian anyway, just to begin with. I'm a Russian Jew. But Estonians are related to Finns and to Hungarians. And Lithuanians is just a different branch. It's, when those tribes migrated from Asia, Lithuanians and Estonians came from different branches. But in any case, whatever. We're all Americans now, so that's what matters.
I will always take the wise history lesson. But why don't you go ahead, because you've got a really unique story. I mean, we'll get into some of the trading details and everything. But as a young man, you left that part of the world, and I think you've got an interesting story how you made it to America. I think that's probably one of the best things about your life is your story of leaving and what happened.
Well, there is a book that the Hoover Institution for the Study of War, Revolution, and Peace at Stanford University put out called the KGB Wanted List. I'm in that book twice. KGB tried to catch me and they tried to kill me. Obviously, they failed at that job as well as at many others. But when I was a kid, I was in college, university. I went early. I went to medical school at 16. But I got very political very early on, and I really hated the communist system. I hated it so much that by the time I was in my late teens, I would not go out of the house on national holidays because they would have red flags out, and it would just disgust me to walk under the flags. So I got involved in politics, and more so. And gradually, my friends started going to prisons. And there was no question in my mind that that's where I'm going to end up, because I tend to be pretty, whenever I get involved in something, I like to go far. And I realized I didn't love that country enough, which considered me a second-class citizen anyway. I didn't love that country enough to go to prison for it. And I got a job. Out of medical school, I got a job. Well, I did my residency in psychiatry, and then I got a job on a ship, of all places, as a ship's doctor. And one day when the ship was in Africa, I just put on my running shoes and got going with the rest of the crew in hot pursuit, because nobody was going to go on shore alone. So I really had to dash. Came to the US. Came to the US. I prepared for that thing. I was on the ship for about 2 months prior to this run, and we were in Africa, as I said. And every night I would go to the upper, when the sun came down, wasn't so hot, I would go to the upper deck and skip rope for 2 hours. So when the running time came, I was not the biggest or the strongest man on that ship, but I was the one in best shape. And so when it came to running, nobody caught me, and I broke away from my pursuers, caught a taxi, and had them take me to the U.S. Embassy. The rest is history. I'm here in New York. By the way, did you mention you're from Lithuania? Yeah.
50%, yes. My father's side is 100%, and my mother's side at least brought some class to the operation.
You know who Simas Kudirka is?
No.
Well, you should. He is a very famous Lithuanian. He jumped from a Soviet ship onto a Coast Guard cutter. Get that, on a Coast Guard cutter, off of George's Bank here, right near the United States, and they handed him back. And he did several years in prison. And then it turned out his mother was born in New York, so they released him. He lives in the Bronx now. It was a very famous runaway case. I met him at a party once. Was quite a thing.
Yeah, the only interesting Lithuanian thing I can share right now is that Chicago Tribune just recently released some pictures, and my great uncle was one of the prosecutors of Al Capone back in the day. So these recently released pictures, and he was full on Lithuanian. And so it's quite interesting to see these old pictures. I'm looking at his face and I'm saying, is there any resemblance there? I'm thinking, God, at least I've got a better hairline than he has right now. So, but well, listen, let me jump in also. So you've got this great psychiatry background, which I'm sure. Why don't I just let you run with that? How was that your entryway into trading? Did you use this great background in training, the psychiatry training? Was that how did that play early on as you were moving into trading?
I love psychiatry. I began reading Sigmund Freud when I was 15, 16 years old. I just absolutely, psychiatry made me into who I am. And as I said, I did my residency back in the old country. And when I came to New York, I got accepted into Albert Einstein program here in New York, and which was at the time the best residency in the city. No longer, but it was the best at the time. And I was doing my psych residency, and then I got a job, and I was working as a psychiatrist and developing a private practice and all that. And by the time I got into my mid-30s, I felt that I was about as good as people get. That it was no longer a huge adventure. It was just, grinding and polishing. And I was looking for something to get involved in. And meanwhile, I've been trading a little on the side. And I wouldn't even call it trading. I was gambling. I really didn't know anything. But trading fascinated me, and I got into it deeper and deeper, and I would have a $3,000 account, and I would bust it out and go back to work and put some money together again and open a $5,000 account until I finally figured out the game. Took many years. And I find that a high degree of formal education is a negative when it comes to trading. There was a guy in Chicago by the name of Brian Monison. He is in Market Wizards. Well, he is dead now. But Brian famously said, I have a PhD in mathematics. I specialized in cybernetics, but I was able to overcome these disadvantages and make money. A high degree of education is a hindrance, not help in trading. But in any case, I overcame this hindrance. I figured out the game. And people often ask, what's the similarity between, what does psychiatry and trading have in common? Well, they're both based on reality. You look at a chart and you're trying to see what you really want to see there. But the chart is doing what it's doing. Do you have the ability to brush away your fantasies and look at the chart with the eyes of a child? Up is up and down is down and sideways is sideways, without fantasizing too much, without saying, well, that's what it should do. So that's really the parallel between psychiatry and trading. And just to finish to finish the topic, hopefully, I practice very little psychiatry now. 1 or 2 hours. It used to be 1 or 2 hours a month. That's about it. But just lately, I got this fascinating patient coming in. This guy is a super serious professional trader. Runs 8-figure account. And he came to me. He was depressed. He lost a lot of money because of poor risk control. So first we dealt with his depression, and now we're dealing with his personality and also looking at markets together. And the guy is coming in and saying, "I made $45,000 last week after our session. I made $78,000 last week. Therapy is paid for. I'm coming here forever." So that's my ongoing psychotherapy going on now. Actually, I'm going to see the guy later today.
Well, how did you make the transition? You're doing, obviously you're working with patients and you start to get into trading. How did you make the transition to where, and I'm going to get into some of the things that you teach and what you help people with, but how did you make the transition to being this helper, this educator, this mentor to others? How did that transition start?
It actually it began when I was a kid, when I was before I was preteen. I had a much younger sister. Both parents were serious career people, so I had a sister who was 10 years younger than me. Completely different generation. So I was very caring about her, obviously, and showing her this and that and everything. So ever since then, I have this sort of typical older brother. I have this attitude towards teaching. That's how really. Plus, my parents had this idea that the pinnacle of creation, the top of creation, was somebody who was a professor, chairman of department. So of course I had to rebel against that, and I escaped from academic medicine. And lo and behold, I started my own school, the elder.com. So. It's funny how it goes from childhood to now. But in any case, the transition from mostly psychiatry to almost exclusively trading came gradually. People often ask me, well, how do I transit from my current profession to trading? Don't jump. Don't do it right away. Just start cutting hours in what you're doing in your primary thing and start adding hours to trading and basically follow the trend. As trading picks up, allocate more and more hours to it. And that's what I did.
Well, I know you've put forward stages of trader development. Why don't you outline for the audience how you see the stages of trader development?
Well, first of all, I want to say that there are stages. I feel sorry for some, poor idiot who reads an advertisement in a newspaper that says you can triple your money in a year working 15 minutes a day with no math. That's fantasy life. Somebody who is not looking for magic, somebody who is looking seriously to learn to trade and to become a trader, has to put time and energy into it. And I often say to people that learning to be a trader will probably take as long and cost as much as getting a college degree. It's a process. You have to read, you have to acquire a body of knowledge, you have to open a small learning account, like having a bicycle with training wheels. You have to practice on a small account, and then you have to start gradually adding equity to it. In terms of stages of development, sort of several road posts. I would say that stage one, when a person is completely green, coming to the markets and just trying to figure out which end is up, and if during the stage a person can lose no more than 10%, that's wonderful. They're ahead of the game. So at the first stage of trader development, when a person is completely green, losing 10% a year or less is a wonderful result.
Now, most people hear that and they're like, well, hold on. You're telling me a wonderful result is to only lose 10% a year.
Well, look, Michael, suppose you decide to become a dentist, right? Suppose you decide that, all your life, you really want to be a dentist.
My father's a dentist, by the way.
Okay, so you decide that it was a huge mistake to become a trader and a writer. You're going to become a dentist, and you go to dental school. Are you going to make money in your first year of dental school? Right? I mean, you can be brilliant, but you're not going to make any money as a dentist. It's going to cost you money. You're going to pay for education. You're going to read, to study, to spend time in the lab making whatever they make in the first year of dental school. You're not going to make money as a dentist in the first year. So and if I was a recruiter for dental school, and I would say to you, Michael, come, join our school. You're going to be making money within months of joining us. You would know that I'm bullshitting you. That I have some hidden agenda. And it's the same way with trading. If you're going to learn how to trade, you should anticipate it will take you time. And in the beginning, when you as a beginning trader go against somebody like Michael Covel, two of you are putting on a trade, well, make a wild guess. Who is going to walk away with money, right? So as a beginner, you should anticipate that you will lose some. Now, the idea is to lose as little as possible, to have a small account, to practice very tight money management, which is one of my favorite topics. But yeah, at the first stage of development as a trader, it would be strange not to lose money. As a matter of fact, one of the worst things that happened to me when I first began learning to trade, and I knew nothing, I made money on my first trade, and then I made money on my second trade. Well, after that, I got this delusional idea that trading was easy, and I had it figured out. took me a good couple of years to work out from under that delusion.
So you got to be ready for that first year. You got to be willing to take your lumps. Maybe you get lucky, but you sure as heck can't count on that. So where do you progress after that stage?
Well, once you have, and remember, my strong suggestion at the first stage: trade with a small account. You certainly don't want to put all your savings into this new venture. Go easy in the beginning. This is a learning time. Stage 2, you want to outperform riskless assets. In other words, you can put your money into the bank and buy a CD and get maybe a couple of % there. Can you consistently beat that in your trading? It's surprisingly difficult for a beginner. It's surprisingly difficult. I mean, it's easy to do on a single trade, sure, but over a course of many trades, over the course of several quarters, it's a hard thing to do. And that's stage 2, outperforming riskless assets. But once you're doing that for a few quarters, you know that you're in good shape. You know that it really starting to look like you know what you're doing. Now you can start adding capital to your account step by step, not too much, maybe 50%. If you're trading a $20,000 account, you go to 30, but no more than that. If 30 goes well, maybe you will go to 45. But you start adding capital every few months. And then, you just find out how good you are. Some people are very, very good. Some people are solid. Some people are so-so. But that's stage 3.
3 stages total in your mind?
Well, it's a very rough division. But yeah, I would say as a rough division, 3 stages. So first, don't lose more than 10% of your equity. Stage 2, outperform riskless assets. Stage 3, find out how good you really are.
Let me jump back to something real quick too, because I don't think I asked your specific influences. What were there books or there resources, things that helped to shape you early on before, for example, your first book was published?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge book reader. So at the time I got into the field, which was in the late 70s, the body of trading literature was much smaller than it's now. It was really very, very small. Well, probably there were maybe several hundred books about trading. Now, I think Wiley, my publisher, publishes something like, maybe 100 books a year at least. And then there are other publishers as well. So, but back then, there were not too many books. And I have read them all. I have read everything there was to read. That's my background, my education, my background, my personality. I want to get complete background. I've read everything. I've read Charles Dow. I've read Robert Rea, I've read Schabacker. I even read Gann and Elliott before I figured out that that was nonsense. But I've read it all. So that was one thing.
I remember buying those W.D. Gann books early on because I thought, well, that was what you were supposed to read. And I'd be reading this stuff and I go, this makes no sense.
I met W.D. Gann's son about 20 years ago. We had a club here in New York, Society for Investigation of Recurrent Events, and I would say that 2/3 of our meetings were market related. So we would have a speaker, we would have a dinner, speaker, and hang out a little. So this guy came from Boston. His name was Gann. So I'm listening to him. He is some kind of bank analyst, and I said to him, "Are you related to W?" He said, "Oh, that was my father." And the son was about 70. So I say, "Is it true that your father made these millions and he flew around in a private plane?" He says, "Nah." He was actually angry at his father because father could never afford a secretary. So this kid wanted to play ball, and instead he had to copy all these materials by hand for sale. And father could not make any money trading. He could when he was younger, but then he lost this ability. And so he was selling manuals. And at the time he died in retirement in Florida, told me the son, the value of his estate in the 1950s was $100,000. Now, he wasn't poor, but he certainly was not. He was very far from rich.
But the legend of his stuff still persists for a lot of new traders. They still come in that way and get suckered into it.
Yeah, well, the facts are well known, but people who sell Gann stuff, certainly, they have a different agenda.
Yeah. Well, let me jump into something. You mentioned it as one of your favorites, and you mentioned the topic of money management. And what I'd like is if you can. Because there's going to be some people listening that are very experienced. There's going to be some people that are brand new. But from your perspective, can you introduce this concept of money management, and then we can start to elaborate on it, but introduce what it is and why it's needed and pros and cons, and come at it from your perspective?
Money management is about as needed in trading as a life jacket on a boat. Now, you may be able to go out without a life jacket and come back safely and all that. But if you keep going out long enough, without a life jacket, trouble is there. The thing is, markets, I believe, are fundamentally not predictable. In other words, I can say, based on my analysis, I think there is a high possibility that this stock will go up, and there is in fact a high possibility that this stock wants to go up, but I cannot tell you with certainty that it wants to go up, because, as I said before, I think that thing is essentially unpredictable. There is just too much unknown in the markets. So suppose my analysis is right and the stock goes up, and I bet my account on it, or a quarter of my account on it. Then there is another stock and another stock, and you do 3 or 4 of those in a row, you feel like you can walk on water. And then you say, my analysis says this stock is going to go up, and but this time you're betting half of your account on it, and lo and behold, thing falls apart. And suddenly all your winnings from the past are destroyed. And as a matter of fact, your entire equity is negative, and you're in a deep hole. And how are you going to dig yourself from out of it? So because of before I talk about money management, I want to say there are two kinds of causality, dynamic and statistic. Dynamic causality is this. You take a pencil and push it on your desk, and whichever way you push it, that pencil is going to go. That's dynamic causality. You apply force, it goes in this direction. That's simple. But statistic causality is if I gave you a box and I will say, Michael, there are 20 tennis balls in it, and 12 of them are green and 8 of them are yellow. So what color do you want to bet on? Well, of course you'll say you're going to bet on green. But so you put your hand in, there is a possibility that you will pull 2, 3, 4, 5 yellow balls in a row, right? So if you're betting a large fraction of your account, by the time your system is correct, should bet on green. By the time by the time this bad run comes to an end, your account is demolished. Okay? So that's why money management is needed, because stock market doesn't operate on dynamic causation; it operates on statistic causation. So that's the preamble.
I mean, that's a huge insight. I mean, for a lot of people never get past that, do they? I mean,
no, because look. I remember when I was trading and I would have learning to trade beginning, I would be running, run up my equity up, 50%, 80%, crash, 50, 80, I would have this wild equity swings and I had no clue. It puzzled me to no end. Why is it happening? I mean, clearly I know something about markets. To take an account and run it up 50% in several months, clearly I have to know something about markets. How come I end up losing money? Right? So I was beating my head against the wall, and there was no book. There was nothing to explain how it was happening. Then the strangest thing happened. I graduated, finished my residency, and I got a little more money, and I started putting more money into trading. And once my account got up to $60,000, I started making money. And again, I was puzzled. I haven't changed a thing. I was trading the same method, but once I went north of 60, it turns from a losing to a winning account. It was only years later I figured out why that happened. Because I continued to trade the same size. There was a certain size I was comfortable with. And so once the account grew bigger, that size fell into money management rules, which I didn't even know existed. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lesson a lot of people just never progress to. I mean, if you were to say what percentage from all your experience, and you've talked to so many different traders at so many different levels, what percentage of traders, and I'm thinking in my own mind of very bright doctors, attorneys that I know that have no idea about my world and the things that I put out there, but what percentage of traders and investors, if we were just to sit down with a blank slate, what percentage do you think actually are even aware of what money management is?
Look, I don't know, Michael. You may know better than I, because I tend to deal, people who read my books. I mean, I don't know who all of them are, but I run very few classes, and when people who come to my classes tend to be pretty high end.
Right.
So they, I would say, among high end people, maybe 9 out of 10 know what it is. I mean, I sharpen it for them, but it's certainly no news for them. But among people in general, it's very low. I should mention, I published a little ebook. That's my new exciting thing, electronic publishing, moving into the 21st century. I published this little ebook. It's on Amazon. It's called "To Trade or Not to Trade." There was this guy in England, Shakespeare, stole my title. To Trade or Not to Trade, Beginner's Guide. $8 on Amazon. And I begin the book by saying, listen, you're coming into an extremely exciting area that I love, which also happens to be highly dangerous. So let me begin by saying in advance, here are personality traits that will make you a loser. So if you have those traits, make this $8 the last expense ever in the stock market. Just turn around and leave before you do any more damage. Now, if you have these personality traits, which are suitable for trading, please continue to read. But remember, we're going to talk about risk management. We're going to talk about record keeping and all this boring, quote unquote, boring stuff that separates winners from losers. So I actually wrote an ebook for beginners to remedy the problem that you're talking about.
Gotcha. Well, it's funny you mentioned it. That's one of the things on my list too. Is I need to migrate to some of this ebook. You got a head start on me. I'm still in the old school printing. It seems like with all these publishers. Let me jump to something slightly different. I know there's probably unless you want to add a little bit more on the money management.
Well, there are rules of money. There's a 2% rule and a 6% rule. They're outlined in all of my books. Please go ahead.
Gotcha. Yes, definitely. Make sure you go buy Dr. Elder's books. We have to support the lifestyles that we have to lead, whatever those are. I'm not sure exactly.
I don't know. I never taken any, those, I must say, the royalties for the books put my children through college and graduate schools. I haven't taken any of that money out. Now I'm supporting the education of my niece and nephew. But I don't know. I'm trading that account. So I'm just, any royalties come in and throw them into trading account, having fun. Go ahead.
Let me, I know you're big on keeping records, diaries. Talk about the notion of writing things down and what's behind it and why it's so important.
Years ago, when I was actively practicing psychiatry, a patient would come in, and part of history taking, I would ask them about their drinking. And every once in a while, you run into somebody who you suspect is an alcoholic. So I would say so to the patient. And some would accept, and many would deny. Well, if a guy denied that he was an alcoholic, I never argued. I would say, look, I want you to continue drinking for the next week, exactly how you drink. Don't change a thing. But every time you take a drink, I want you to write down what you drank and how much. Just come back with a record and we'll take a look at it. And no alcoholic ever could come back with a complete record. They would be just terrified looking at the thing. Why? Because people who are engaged in some kind of impulsive, stupid, self-destructing behavior, the last thing they want to do is look in the mirror, because creating records creates a mirror of your actions. Now, moving from psychiatric office to trading, most traders just run forward and keep making the same mistakes months after months and year after year. And there is a Russian expression. It's called, don't step on the same rake twice. A guy steps on a rake in the garden, it stands up and hits him in the forehead. It can happen to anybody, but don't step on the same rake twice. So keeping records basically creates a breaker mechanism in unproductive, bad, unuseful behavior. Keeping records makes you alert to yourself. When you trade, you have several components of your trading. Obviously, you have your computer, you have your database, you have internet knowledge that you have acquired, all these wonderful things. But also your personality, your moods, your fears, your likes and dislikes, all of that is very much a part of trading. And I think it's important to pay attention to yourself and to your decision-making process. So that's why I keep saying to traders, the single most important factor in your success or lack of such is the quality of your records. You've got to keep a diary of your trades. I used to keep it on paper. I used to keep it on a variety of computer forms. We now have an absolutely fantastic record-keeping system. I just love it. I live in the system. Together with my partner and friend, Kerry Lavorne, we run this website, spiketrade.com. And as a part of that website, we now have a trade journal. And that, I think, is just the best way to keep records. I keep all my trade records at spiketrade.com now. So, and I find that, ever since I began keeping good records some years ago, my trading, I could see an improvement in my trading. And then every couple of months, you have a free evening, just go back and review all trades. Because we all make our trading decisions at the right edge of the chart. Well, how does this trade look when it migrates to the middle of the chart? I mean, do you think I remember what I traded in May of this year or in June of this year? I remember one or two spectacular trades, but 99% of what I did, I have no recall. However, sometime this weekend, I'm going to sit down, pull out my diary, and review my trades from May and June. And it's going to be a fantastic educational experience, like a class for one.
Let me jump into something fairly basic, but I think it's something that a lot of perhaps even experienced traders might not initially have down as they move through their trader development, which is the notion of exiting longs and shorting weakness. So the idea of having that exit strategy, on the upside, but then being comfortable to not just hold on the downside, but actually turn around and go the other way. I know you've actually put some full-length books out there on this subject.
Yeah, I have a book out called The New Sell and Sell Short, and actually, of all my books, that was probably the least popular, because even though I published, I was having dinner with my publisher. It was 2007, December of 2000, no, end of 2000. In any case, 2007. And he was fishing for a project, and I said, well, there is no book on selling and selling short. He says, who do you think would write? I said, well, I guess I could. So I wrote this book. It came out in May of 2008. And, the bear market was really picking up speed then. And you would think the book would become a bestseller. No such thing. No such thing. People really don't like selling and selling short. I love shorting. I came from commodities. My initial experience was trading commodities. So of course, in commodities, everybody sells short. But you have to do the same thing in stocks. It's the market is a two-way street. It goes up and it goes down. As a matter of fact, it goes down about twice as fast as it goes up, and you can make money trading both ways. People are afraid of shorting. Usually, the first thing they say is, "Oh, what happens if you buy the worst thing that your stock goes down to zero, and if you sell short and it goes up against you, you can be wiped out." So, well, if you get wiped out by a short stock, by a short trade, you're an idiot, and you deserve to be wiped out. It means that you're trading without a stop. Of course, you have to run at some point. You have to set a stop. So, shorting is completely doable. I sort of make a joke out of it, and I say, contrary to what your mother may have told you, shorting can be very pleasant, and just use protection when you do it. Don't listen to your mother. Go ahead, do it, but use protection, and you can be very well. When I teach classes, I always tell people, look, you've got to sell short. Now, find a stock that you hate. Find a stock that if you buy it, it's going to go down. Well, now go ahead and sell short. But don't short a lot. Sell short, 100 shares, 50 shares, 20 shares, whatever. Small quantity, but just get comfortable with the concept of shorting. As always, I say, learn on small side. But you have to learn how to sell short. And maybe you will say, look, I really don't like shorting. I prefer buying long. Well, that's fine. But you have to make that decision after you have shorted. So you make that decision on the basis of your experience and not out of fear.
As I listen to you, Alex, and I hope this doesn't sound too off the rails, but as you're talking about protection, and I'm thinking back, and I'm going to be very discreet as I describe this, but the way that I actually learned what the word "da" meant in Russian, I'll just leave it to people's imagination how I figured that out with a very, very attractive Russian woman, and I had no earthly idea I had no idea what that word meant before that moment. So.
Yeah, long time ago in a galaxy far away.
Anyways, completely off the rails there. And let me ask something though, because I think one of the really interesting things that you do is with your work is travel, and I'm very envious because I've done a lot of travel, a lot of speaking abroad, but I'm very envious because you are really truly out there reaching and touching groups of traders at frankly a lot of distant outposts, so to speak. And I'm sure your growing up has helped you to know different parts of the world better than perhaps some of us Americans that are a little too Americanized. But talk about the contrast, perhaps, if any, between some of the places that you've been to travel to teach, Eastern European countries, et cetera, compared to, let's say, U.S. students. Is there a difference really, or is it just everybody really wants to learn?
No, there are definitely differences. Similarities, of course, mostly, but differences as well. First of all, I want to say that technical analysis is a study of crowd psychology. It's actually I call it applied social psychology, practicing social psychology for profit, and crowds behave quite similarly in all countries. If you look at chart patterns, in New York, in Moscow, in Sydney, in Singapore, they look remarkably similar. And if I removed identifying codes and prices, I doubt he would be able to say which is from which country. As a matter of fact, I would bet that he would not be able to say which is from which country because they're so similar. Crowds behave in very similar ways. And this is why technical analysis is a global language and it works around the globe. Now, in terms of individual traders, people are quite different. I find that in America, traders tend to be older, more educated. Sort of an average trader, I remember seeing the numbers, is a 50-year-old college-educated male, married, often a business owner. So it's an older group of people. Whenever I go to Eastern Europe, I was in Kiev last year, it strikes me how amazingly young people in the group, people in the classroom are. I mean, it's full of 20-somethings. Now, to see somebody who is 50 or 60 in Eastern Europe, it's amazing. So, gee, of course, people age there a lot sooner also, but lots of young people and very eager and very inventive and very, very sharp. In Asia, I think more women are trading than in this country. Plus, I think in Asia there is a much stronger gambling component than either in the U.S. or in Europe. So there are certain kind of personal colors, different psychological coloring. But it's looking at individual traders. But when you look at the charts which are created by crowds, there's not much of a difference.
I am always amazed or not amazed, but I always kind of pause before I answer because it always strikes me odd when a new trader or someone reaches out to me and they want to know if this style of trading is for them, for their particular, someone's writing from Indonesia or Singapore or something, it always kind of just strikes me as to why in their own mind they might be thinking that their country is so terribly unique in terms of the markets when as you just correctly said, the markets are just people coming together and buying and selling. It's crowd psychology. It's the same everywhere.
It is. Yeah. It is. But in terms of trading in worldwide markets, I always advise people to try and trade where they live, because the question I ask them is, where do you think profits are coming from? Strangely enough, many people don't think about it, and then they realize that the only way, the only place from which profits will come are the pockets of other traders. Well, other traders are just as smart as they are, and they have just as good computers, and they're just as eager for the money. So it's really a tough fight to get money out of somebody else's pockets while paying commissions and suffering slippage. So I say it's bad. People ask me, well, do you trade in Australia? Do you trade in Russia? I say, look, it's hard enough to trade when I am awake. I don't want people picking my pockets while I'm asleep. If you go to a market in a different time zone, you can't really watch them intraday, and I think it's not a good thing.
One of the, I saw a great, I'm pretty sure this is a line of yours. If it's not, you can just say, Mike, well, you didn't do your homework very well. But you said, I think financial markets are like manic depressive patients.
Yeah.
That's you,
that's
right?
Me. That's me. That'll be 5 cents for professional opinion.
So what? I know you have a little explanation that goes with that, but what does that mean to the person that hears that? What is it?
There was a guy, what I mean, markets go up and markets go down. But let me be a little more specific. There was a guy who died just maybe a year or two ago, Benoit Mandelbrot. He was a mathematician who actually ended up winning a Nobel Prize. And many years ago, the Egyptian government hired him to study cotton prices because cotton is the major export of Egypt, and obviously, they want to sell their cotton high. So this one of the great mathematicians of the world was hired by the government. He studied cotton prices, and he came up with this conclusion. Hold on to your seat. Prices oscillate above and below value. Prices oscillate above and below value. And that's one of very few things that are facts about the markets, not a rule of thumb, not in my experience, not it seems to me, a mathematical fact that prices oscillate above and below value. Now, we can define value. Of course, a fundamental analyst has his ways of defining value. Me, as a technician, I use a pair of moving averages, and I believe that value lives in the zone between those averages. And now the market goes below value, and that's where people start panicking and selling, and I'm looking to buy. And when prices return to value, I take profits. Now prices get really happy and they start rising above value, and people get happy and they start buying. Well, I'm looking for a shorting opportunity. I'm looking to sell short above value. So I use envelopes, of course, to help identify value, plus a whole bunch of indicators. But that's the manic depressive behavior to me. You know, there is a joke. They say a neurotic is a person who builds castles in the clouds. A psychotic lives in those castles, and the psychiatrist is the fellow who collects rent. So I want to profit from crazy behavior. I don't want to be a part of it, which most people are.
So Alex, let's assume someone has trained with you. They've been through education with you. They've come out on the other side. They have a great understanding. They get it. Aren't there a certain number of people though that self-sabotage themselves even when they've come out on the other side of being awake, so to speak?
Sure. Oh, look, there are people, well, first of all, talking about people who train with me, the number is very small because all I do is I run traders camps where we accept 25 people and we run them either once or twice a year. So, you're not talking about a huge number. It's the numbers of people I quote unquote trained is very small. I have given lots of public classes where, class goes for a day, but hey, you might not be able to learn to ride a bicycle in a day, much less to trade. Just orientation, basically, give you some do's and don'ts. But there are people who will not succeed, no matter who will never succeed. And actually, as I mentioned earlier today, when I wrote that book, To Trade or Not to Trade, that ebook on Amazon, it actually begins by saying, listen, some people will never succeed. If you have, for example, if you have an addiction problem, if you have any kind of substance problem, forget about trading. You will never make money if you're an addict. I don't use this language, a little softer. If you're obsessional, if losing 10 cents on the street upsets you and you ruminate about it, you cannot trade. Some other trades as well. So no, look, not everybody can trade. Just like not everybody can do anything. I mean, it's a big world.
Yeah. Listen, I know can't keep you all day. We could probably talk for hours and hours. I want to kind of, as I wrap up though, I want to kind of let you take the floor a little bit. Not that you haven't already done that, but all these years later. So, this long process, this journey from Estonia, going through Africa, getting to New York, building yourself a life success. What do you learn today? What strikes you new? What makes you kind of go, aha? What are those new things that make you exciting today?
Well, last time I checked, we go through this vale of tears only once. So you might as well enjoy the journey. And the thing that I am most excited these days, it's really a fantastic intellectual as well as emotional adventure, is this group that I run together with my friend and business partner, Kerry Lavorne, spiketrade.com. That's the exciting part. Nobody in the world does it. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Maybe a pale shadow somewhere. But what we do, what we do is this. We have a group of 18 professional and semi-professional traders, and they're obligated to submit a pick of what they think is going to be their favorite best trade for the week ahead. It can be long, it can be short, and we only do American stocks at this point, stocks and ETFs. And at the end of the week, so you can enter anytime on or after Monday's close, and you have to exit anytime on or before. So you have to enter on or before, on or after Monday's open, and be out before the end of the day on Friday. And so every week we have winners and losers, and at the end of the quarter we accumulate all the results, and winners get paid and they get diplomas. And to me, and then we have members who participate on a voluntary basis. So we have elite people who are always up, and then members participate on a voluntary basis. And it's a great pleasure to see how people get it, how people learn, how people get with the program and look at each other, ask each other questions and advance. One of the typical emails I get in Spike Trade, a guy will write to me and say, I'm now winning prizes in Spike Trade, write some lower level member, but I cannot make money in my own account. And whenever I see that, I say to him, you're in a good place, because that's the standard operating procedure. People come in lost, they figure out the game in Spike Trade, and then in a few months it translates into their own trading. So just keep on doing what you're doing, don't change a thing. And sure enough, in a few months, we're right now coming to the end of the quarter. September is the last month of third quarter, and just earlier today, Kerry and I were going back and forth. We have one man who had a very bad quarter. Well, his wife had cancer, and he just completely lost focus on trading. And unfortunately, he hit some bad numbers, so he will have to separate from Spike Trade. But we have a guy in Nevada who is just doing fabulously, and so we will be promoting him to the Spiker. And that to me is hugely exciting. I mean, I'm trading. I'm usually piggybacking at least one or two of Spiker's picks. But also, in addition to just making money from piggybacking those wonderful trades, I enjoy dealing with these people, answering their questions, and seeing them grow. It's just wow! It's exciting.
Okay, I have one more quick question. As you live in that fine New York City, what's your favorite thing to do in New York City? Favorite place to eat? Let's just really concrete. Favorite place to eat in New York City?
Well, I would say there is a Michelin rated sushi restaurant called Jewel Bako. Jewel, like a jewel, and Bako. So I like going there for sushi once in a while. That's probably my favorite place.
Well,
but my partner in Spike Trade, Kerry, he, through hanging out with me, developed a serious sushi addiction. He is based in Alabama, but he developed the sushi addiction. So he comes to New York and finds the best restaurants, and then I follow him.
I tell you, well, we've got a lot in common then with the sushi, because I think if I could eat sushi every day, I'd probably be happy.
Well, there's also a wonderful restaurant around the corner from the apartment, a few blocks from the apartment, called East. And they have kaiten sushi, which is running sushi, where you sit next to this conveyor belt, and this wonderful river of sushi is coming to you. 2 portions, like 2 little pieces per plate, and each plate is a different color, different price. And you just sit there, this river of sushi is flowing at you, and you just take whatever appeals to you and eat it. And come to New York. I'll show it.
Absolutely. We'll definitely take you up on that. Well, listen, Alex, it was great speaking with you today. For people out there, it's pretty easy to find you, but elder.com, ELDER.com. And that's going to
or spiketrade.com.
Okay, and that's going to take you to everything you're up to. Books, you name it, etc.
At elder.com is probably best, because it will also link to Spike Trade. But they will see the books. They can. Actually, this morning I was writing this newsletter. Once a month I write this newsletter where I put my ramblings on paper. So we'll be sending a newsletter, and it's free. We'll be sending the newsletter out tomorrow or Friday. So they can get on the list and basically stay in touch. And we're very careful about people's names. I run this little business the way I run medical office. Very decently.
Well, and you got to support the cause, buy the books. We've got to eat that sushi. So the sushi's not free. But listen, Alex, it was good talking. Hopefully we could talk again in the next 6 months or a year or so. It'd be great.
Thank you. Very pleasant.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
My guest today, Alexander Elder, needs not much introduction for those that have seen, read, or purveyed trading books. Alex has written some of the most popular trading books of the last 30 years. If you've not yet seen his work, well, that's your problem, and perhaps you will fix that problem after listening to Alex today. This is my second conversation with Alex. He originally came on the show, I believe, 2012. I had to look it up while we were talking. Boy, time flies. So I'm so appreciative that he trusted in me to come on originally, and it's so much fun to have him back on now in 2018. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Alexander Elder. I'd be amiss, Alex, if I did not start with something that seems to be your passion right now, because literally the scheduling of our interview, this second call we're having today, has been held up by skiing. So a major passion of yours. And what I would love for you to explain, to talk about how long you've been skiing for sure. And we're going to go into trading, but talk about how long you've been skiing and what it is about it for you. Like, what does it really do for you at a root level?
I began as a very young child. I began cross-country skiing. We had a lot of snow where I grew up in Estonia. Sometimes I had to ski to school, but it was very flat there. And I really didn't begin downhill skiing until I came to the United States when I was in my 20s. And soon after that, I started having children, and skis went out the window. And then when kids grew up, became teenagers, I started taking them skiing. My own skiing returned, and now I just love to ski. I live in Vermont. I live 12 minutes away from the ski lift. So after this interview, I'm going to get dressed and go. It's a beautiful sunny day, and ski season is still on. 2 weeks ago, I was skiing in Austria with several friends. What it does for me, it's a wonderful way to connect with nature. It's physical. It's challenging. It's sort of like trading, where you should become better, a little better every time, every week, every year. I got this app that measures the speed with which I ski and the distance I covered. I keep an eye on that thing, always trying to become better, but also just a wonderful way to be out, to breathe fresh air. I would say about a third of the time I ski alone, and 2/3 either with my friends or with my wife. So there's also a company feel to it. It's a great sport.
Has it become your meditation? And the reason I ask that is that in the last 4 or 5 years, I've really become quite addicted to yoga. And it's for the feeling that it gives me, the physical feeling after, I don't know if it's the cortisol changes, whatever, the stress reduction. Do you find something similar with skiing?
Not at all. Not at all. Because I find that when I ski, I have to completely concentrate on skiing and nothing else. I haven't taken any bad falls this season, because in the beginning of the season, I realized that every time I tumbled before, it was because the slope seemed easy or medium, and my thoughts went into something else. I drifted out. I have to be totally, absolutely 100.0% concentrated on the snow, on the position of my skis, and what's ahead of me. So it's not a zone out experience. It's a complete focus on what's on the current moment.
Let me clarify that, because I just took a yoga class last week, and I told this teacher after, I said, what I really love about your class is that it's very physical. I said, I have to fixate and really think about what you're asking us to do. And you hold these positions for a very long time. I'm just somewhat seeing a corollary here, or a correlation, because when you're in that moment and you have to only concentrate on skiing, there's a nice part of that where you get to turn your brain off, though.
Oh, absolutely. Michael, you're absolutely right. It's only the process. It's only the process. It's only this moment. And I can't think of anything else. I can't think of what's coming up later in the day. I can't think of what the euro dollar are doing. I can't think of anything like that. Now, here in the moment.
Now, as you've kind of rekindled it, is it something where you literally have to have it all the time, where I saw a great piece of research the other day from some scientific journal where literally stopping exercise increases the chance for depression.
I have my exercises for summer. I just bought myself a pedal board. It's like a surfboard, but it has a cut in the middle, and you drop pedals into it and go. I live between two lakes. I also have a tractor, and I love working on the property. I have two chainsaws, so I go around and I take down dead trees and I cut them up and hold them to the burn pile. Go to fire department, get a permit, fire up the whole thing. Summers in Vermont are very sweet. I was talking with my friends about going skiing in Norway in July or August. Apparently, they have the ski resort. I just learned about it, which is completely snowed in all year, and people only ski July and August. I love skiing, but there are many other good things as well.
I'm sure some people always want to get to the chase, and they don't know why I might ask someone like yourself about your passion. But to me, these things are all related. It's the 6 inches between the ears. Knowing how somebody kind of relaxes or how somebody gets through their passion, I think it's just so interesting. Here's my big picture question, though, the trading psychology type question to start with. And I'll probably even go back farther in your life for those that are not familiar with your backstory. But since you have become this best-selling author and this consultant and this person that people come to better understand themselves for trading success, what is the biggest change in the landscape that you've seen since perhaps your first book came out? Like, I mean, you've had a chance 20 plus years to witness, the constant 24/7 on TV. Now it's become Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all this stuff. What's changed about human nature? Anything?
The human nature, I don't think, has changed very much. The one change worldwide, and I don't think it impacts trading all that much. I think the world has become much less violent in recent, let's say, in the last half century. We don't think about it because we hear all this horrible news all the time. But if you think about it, during World War I, there were days when 50,000 people would get killed in a single day, and it was sort of, yep, that's how the cookie crumbles. You read about this military adventures now in Iraq and Afghanistan. 3,000 people die, and in the course of the entire war, and everybody is very concerned about it. So the value of human life, I think, has become higher. The level of violence in society is less, and actually, the scientific evidence for that. As they study human skulls for the last several hundred years, they find that skulls are becoming thinner. The chances of someone getting hit on the head with a heavy object is becoming less. And so the evolution propels us towards thinner skull bones. So, but that's the big picture. In trading, people always look for some kind of magic. How to make money working 15 minutes a week, no mathematics required. This kind of nonsense. It always existed, and the magic always changes. It used to be that if you have a calculator, you can calculate an exponential moving average instead of a simple one. Then we got computers. Well, that was a total golden key to success. We had neural networks, we had Elliott wave, we had GAN. I mean, there's always some kind of magic on the horizon. Now, of course, it's algo trading. But in the end, all of that comes to human beings with their emotions. And one of the greatest fallacies of the economists is that they assume that humans are logical beings. To an extent we are, but not to a very large extent. I think we're driven by emotions very much, and that does not change a lot. That's not becoming any thinner like our skulls.
As you mentioned that, to take you back to the thoughts you had about valuing human life and less war, and you just mentioned humans having problems with logic. It's a great little example, though, to talk about war and violence, because it's entirely illogical to think with the population that's expanded and with the number of, look, all deaths are bad from war, but as you point out, the numbers have dropped it's nothing like World War I or World War II. But we still create these monsters in our mind that are very real for people. I mean, is it very real that some people wake up each day and really think they are at risk for terror, right? For example, for a terrorist assault or something like that. But from a logical standpoint, it's just not there.
I live in Vermont, and the form of government here is a town meeting. Once a year, the entire town is welcome to the local school auditorium, and we have a meeting. We discuss the budget. We discuss any topic. So 2 years ago, the local police chief wanted to push through to have a full-time policeman stationed at a local school, which would have cost us money. And there was a discussion of that. And I stood up at that discussion and I said, the risk of being hit by lightning in this country is much higher, substantially higher than the risk of being hurt in a school shooting. So I suggest that before we start stationing a policeman school, we give each child a lightning rod. At least that will make them safer.
Making friends in Vermont with the folks that are scared, throwing some logic at them, huh, Alex?
Yeah. Well, the motion failed.
Let me take you back in time. For those folks that are not familiar with your story, you mentioned Estonia. And if I'm not mistaken, med school, age 16. I mean, that's a kid that's moving pretty quick. So I would love for you to describe for the audience some of your motivations, because I'm guessing you've not forgotten. A kid that gets into medical school at 16 remembers exactly what he was doing as a teenager, I'm guessing. So what was the drive that was pushing you at such a young age?
I didn't have any great interest in medicine, but I wanted to go to the university. I grew up in a very medical family. Everybody was a physician for a couple of generations before me. I needed to get into the university to avoid service in the Soviet army. So to the university I went.
Put a date on that for us.
60s.
Mid-60s, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember growing up, and we had blackouts all the time, because we were told that Americans were coming any day to bomb hell out of us, and so we had bomb drills and this and that and everything. Nasty times, completely repressed society, labor camps, Siberia. It was brutal. I hated the system. I grew up to hate the system. So I went to medical school, but really all I thought about was getting laid. That was my number one agenda.
Getting laid.
Getting laid, getting girls, right? I mean, that's all I could think about. And then also I got some education in the process. I mean, I graduated in the top 10% of my class.
Are you talking about that masculinity thing? I thought that masculinity thing was very toxic these days. I'm not supposed to talk
my mother taught me when I was very young how you open doors to ladies, how you always walk on the left and hold the lady under her elbow with your right hand, how manners, gentlemanliness. I mean, I grew up with that. I mean, I know that masculinity is something toxic these days. I hear about it, but I still operate in an old way. I mean, I have,
We could go off in that direction on quite a bit of time. And we did in our prior episode a little bit, I recall. You talk about growing up in that system, the Soviet system. How did you first start to have, because I'm going to bring it up a couple of years for those people not familiar with your story in a second, you're escaping, so to speak. What was driving your education? Like, how were you developing internally this desire that was obviously building to something else? Because you're in the middle of a very repressed system with a control of information. What were you doing? There was no internet. So what were you doing to get that insight into your brain beyond friends and family?
My grandfather, who was a big influence in my life, my mother's father, he was always listening to foreign radio broadcasts. And by the way, every Soviet city of any size was ringed by special antennas which suppressed the frequencies, shortwave frequencies, on which the Voice of America, Radio Liberty, BBC were broadcasting. I remember to this day, 16 meters, 25 meters, 49 meters. And my grandfather gave me this radio, which actually came from a German submarine, long story. And I would sit in front of that radio and twirl the dial, trying to see who, and there was this wow, wow, wow noise from the suppression towers. And I was trying to get those news from, can I get a little BBC today, or maybe Voice of America is coming through, depending on weather conditions. So I was listening to that. I also had a friend a much senior friend in the university, this man by the name of Garrick Superfin. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn was writing The Gulag Archipelago, Garrick was his archive researcher. And after Solzhenitsyn was exiled from the Soviet Union, Garrick was sent to prison for many years. And he was completely fearless. He would just speak his mind. And so I always sort of hanged around and listened. I mean, there was a sense that the system was completely false. The system was completely inhumane. The system was wrong. I got a sense of that. And, it's a funny thing is I realized fairly early on that I have this nose for quality. I know what's good. And it's not that I worked in it. I have it. It works in trading. It works in human relations, and it works also in politics. I really have a sense for that. And even if the good is suppressed, I can see it.
I love the way you say that, a sense, an intuition for quality. I like to think that I have that too. I'm a big believer when you start to have these debates about nurture and nature. And I've had Anders Ericsson on this show, who's done so much research in deliberate practice. But I don't know. Even if I look at family members and stuff, I don't know that sometimes they have the same eye. So it's an interesting way you just say that, that eye for quality. And you're not just talking materialistic, you're talking about people and philosophies, everything. Let me jump you up a little bit in time, because I find this fascinating. We've talked about it before, but you get your medical degree, you're a doctor, in your early 20s, you make a break for it. Why don't you describe that? Because it's one of those things where, most people today are going to hear this story and they're going to be like, they don't have any frame of reference for how much intestinal fortitude it took to do that.
I grew up in the Soviet Union. The borders were absolutely locked. The borders were locked. There was a tremendous military force guarding borders. Example, I grew up in Estonia. I love swimming, and I got into snorkeling. Well, the law was, if you went swimming, you could, you need a mask, a snorkel, and fins, right? You were not allowed to have all three. You could have two, but not three. Why? Because Finland was 90 kilometers away. What if you swim to Finland? And that was the law. So if they caught you with all three, they would confiscate it and they would arrest you. I felt like an animal in the cage. I wanted to get out. So I got a job as a ship's doctor. And when the ship was in Africa, I jumped ship and I ran away. I literally ran.
Okay, hold on. What kind of ship are we talking that you jumped ship from exactly? Was it into the water, or were you guys docked, or what?
We were docked in Africa, in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. But the thing is that the Soviet Union was a completely isolated system, not only politically, but also economically. I was the fifth best paid person on the ship, and I was getting $10 a month, plus some Russian money. It was cheaper for the Soviet government to put a doctor on a ship, a merchant ship, which only had maybe 80-person crew. It was cheaper to put a doctor on a ship than to take somebody to a harbor doctor if somebody got sick. So I was working as a doctor on a ship, and we were allowed on shore leave, and in groups only, and the group was responsible for coming back together. And if somebody tried to escape, the group was told to do anything, including kill him, and don't worry, the Soviet government will get you out of it. I made sure, and of course, the group from which you ran away gets punished. So I made sure I ran away from the group which was led by the secretary of the Communist Party for the ship. I did not run from any of my friends. I ran from the bad guy. I ran to the US, and before that, I would go to the upper deck every evening. Africa is hot, so when sun starts coming down, I would go to the upper deck and skip rope for a couple of hours. So when the running time came, I was not the strongest man on the ship, but I was certainly in the best shape of anyone. So I just took off and right, left, then I grabbed a taxi and went to the US Embassy. The rest is history.
Let me ask you, to the extent you know, how irregular would that have been in the 60s, early 70s when this took place? How irregular in escape? I mean, this wasn't really commonplace, was it?
Oh no, this was like, things like that happened once every few years. Maybe they would have an escape like mine 2-3 times a decade. I mean, it was completely unusual. They did a pretty good job vetting who gets a job on a ship and who doesn't. It wasn't a simple thing. There is a book put out by the Hoover Institution in California called The KGB Wanted List. I'm in that book twice. They did not like me.
I love that, though. I mean, you at least today, I'm sure, look, you saw a lot of things in your life that I did not see, but I'm sure today you probably wear it a little bit as a badge of honor. Now with some time to look back on it, that you actually pulled that off. It's pretty damn cool, isn't it?
I wouldn't have done it today. Today I realized I was risking my life. It's so dangerous. As I get older, I value life a lot more. But back then I was living forever, and I took a wild chance, and it worked out very well for me. It was a kid stuff.
Let me press you, though. You say you took a wild chance, though, but it sure sounds like in your description, it's pretty calculated. The reason I'm even going down this path is because I think the way that you think is the useful takeaway from our conversation. When people finish listening to an hour with Alexander Elder. It's the takeaway of how you think. It's not like, okay, yes, Alex can tell you exactly, here are some trading strategies. Here is the trading psychology. But to me, it's like to get inside the mind of somebody who's making that decision. What's coursing through the veins, right? That's the cool stuff.
I mean, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared. We're having this conversation fairly early in the morning before the market is open. Well, I've been up for the last hour, and what am I doing? My morning homework, studying, researching, planning, scheming, what I will do and what I will not do today. And that's what I did. That's what I did back then in Africa. I mean, running from that ship with my crewmates in hot pursuit. I mean, that's like putting on a trade. The trade is on. But the work was done way before that.
I think about it like, working on ourselves is the best way to work on anything, whether that's trading or entrepreneurship, starting a business, whatever. It's the interior work is where it starts. And when you talk about let's kind of move into the teaching of this, because I mean, we're giving the teaching by example, by your example right now, but you have to, and you've done this for decades now, to take people that perhaps don't have these experiences, these life or death experiences that you faced. They did not necessarily have that chance to get those adrenaline rushes and really kind of, have a wake up call, so to speak. A lot of people today, I think it's a fair assessment to say, and you talked about the lack of violence. I think people have gotten a little soft. And I think sometimes maybe if they hear Alexander Elder talking, you might sound a little like, well, gosh, is it really, do I really have to work at it like that? Do I really have to focus like that? I mean, can't I just kind of dial it back some?
You have to work hard. You have to work hard. And you have to be you have to find a place where you're emotionally stable, when you're emotionally not shaken by the market, where you are making decisions and not just jumping like a Pavlov's dog in response to the market ringing a bell. For example, just yesterday, the Dow opened down 500 points and challenged recent important lows, and then it ended up 200 points higher. This is precisely the kind of market where people who are not strong, people who are not skilled, people who are not prepared will sell at the bottom, and then, of course, they will wait, and they will wait for signals and more signals and more signals. Finally, all signals are good. Now they are buying. Well, by that time, I may be selling short already, because the best buy signals occur at the market top. That's where everything is perfect, and everybody knows that this is a bullish market. Well, what everybody knows is not worth knowing.
As you mentioned that down-up volatility on the Dow yesterday, speak to all of those millions of people across the planet that watched that. So there's people watching every minute of that. And it strikes me now as I continue to age, like all of us, but it strikes me that if one has a choice to trade, that widening your time horizon seems to have some resonance in terms of stress reduction, because it seems like the folks that are like all day long glued to every piece of information possible, it seems like a really difficult quality of life in the long term.
I think it's also extremely counterproductive for trading. If someone is glued to the screen all day long, they inevitably can start following the market instead of looking at it from a distance, instead of looking at it in an objective way. Look, here is the concept that I keep repeating it. To anybody who would listen, it took me a long time to comprehend that, so I figure I have to repeat it often for somebody else to comprehend it. Looking at the stock market, we all trade pretty much the same stocks, year in and year out, a decade in and decade out. It's the same Ford, General Motors, then Tesla comes in, and Facebook comes in. But the point is, we trade pretty much the same basket of stocks. Now, some stocks get taken over, some stocks go out of business, some new stocks, some IPO occurs, but that's around the fringes. We trade the same things. So there are strong hands who buy low and then take profits high, and then there are weak hands who panic at the lows and get enough assurance to buy at the highs. And this constant seesaw goes in from strong hands into weak hands during rally. And then the decline begins, and now the weak hands start being shaken out. And at the bottom, the last weak hands just panic and wet their pants and sell their stocks. And that's where I buy. The best buying opportunities occur at the point of maximum danger. Now, it takes some technical knowledge to identify that maximum danger with some degree of precision. I don't claim to have 100% degree, but a reasonable degree to get it, to get the zone.
Well, there's no such thing as 100% degree either. This is what you would say, I'm sure.
You know, I know only one guy who always buys at the bottoms and sells at the absolute tops, and his name is a liar.
I want to keep you a point for a second that we just were talking about, the glued to the screens part. If you were to, in your mind, create a composite explanation from new traders, experienced traders, what is the drive to want to be glued? What is the advantage that people that don't yet have your perspective, why do they want to be glued? What do they think they're getting with the glued part?
I think there are two parts to that. It's a great question. I think there are two parts to that answer. First of all, I think it's kind of financial pornography. Just seeing how this thing moves up and down, it's like watching a porno video. It's very entertaining, especially for someone who is new to the system. It's extremely entertaining. She moved her leg this way. Wow, I've never seen that. The other part is that someone who is losing money and is becoming afraid and feels that he is just being buffeted by the market, he looks at it like a rabbit is looking at a snake. And the rabbit is just frozen looking at the snake. Look how that snake moves. Oh, maybe it doesn't see me. Oh, I think it's moving away. Oh, it's coming closer. It's partly entertainment, what I call financial pornography, and partly it's feeling weak, dependent, fearful, and keeping your eyes on the snake. But neither of those things does you any good. I mean, here I am before the opening. I make my trade plans, and I really like to hang around for the first 20, 30 minutes to see how the market opens. And then I'm going to go ski, and then I'm going to come back, I have my orders in. Then I'm going to come back before the market closes, and I like to be around for the last hour before it closes, see if any changes, adjustments are needed. But I'll be glued to the slopes, not to the screen.
Thinking about those folks glued to the screen, it's really difficult, though, too, when you have something, for example, the reason, and I don't take anything away from him at all. I salute him. He's an entrepreneur. He's done well. But, Michael Bloomberg is a billionaire because he has given people one of those kind of porn screens of just data that never stops. Where I'm really trying to drive you at is to get people to understand that it's not all of the data. You got to make some choices, right? You can't, trying to take in all the data, I don't know how that fire hose approach works.
I sometimes compare trading to medicine. You cannot, now in the 21st century, you cannot know all of medicine. You cannot be an ophthalmologist, a dermatologist, a surgeon, and a psychiatrist, etc., etc. You simply cannot. There is too much. When you go into medicine, you've got to specialize. You choose a specialty. That is your specialty. That's where you aim to become very, very good. And then anything outside of your specialty, you just have to know enough to say, oh, that's not for me, and I have a good referral for you. That's who you go to. And the same thing in trading. Between fundamental news, between political news, between technical developments, between all this tremendous wealth of technical indicators, there is no way to master, never mind master, there is no way to learn everything there is to be learned about the markets. So you have to be humble. You have to say, I'm just a simple peasant. I'm going to find a sector of market knowledge, market expertise, and I will aim to become very good in my sector. And anything outside of that sector, I'm just going to raise my hands and say, not for me.
I've seen you describe it as mind, method, and money. Why don't you apply some weights there for the audience? Where do you weight things? From my perspective, I would say that the vast majority of market players that are first getting started really put almost all of the weight on method. It's like the things that we're talking about today, the 6 inches between thy ears, is just like, oh, that's just Covel being philosophical. That's Elder just going off on a tangent. That stuff's not so important to me. Just tell me the indicator.
I can also show you a picture from a magazine with a computer. Well, back in the old days when there were disk drives, with $100 bills coming out of the disk drive. That was my favorite ad. If you get a computer properly tuned, unfortunately, every single computer that I bought had the direction of $100 bills reversed. I was feeding them into the computer as opposed to getting them out. Yeah, but that's what all the beginners do. If you can only select a proper parameters for stochastic, and by the way, what moving averages you use? Is it 22 days or 21 days? Which is better? If only, and listen, I went through that stage myself. It's tremendously attractive. It's intellectually challenging. And when I began to trade, I learned, that's all I did, learning technical analysis. And then I realized, well, wait a second, what's wrong with this picture? I think I know technical analysis and I know it pretty well, but my equity goes up 40% and down 80%. What's wrong with this picture? Same technical analysis, huge equity swings. That was decades ago. The mind, the psychology. The third M, money management. A trader, a system that's making money for me, steadily making money for me year after year. And I would say that chances are very high that this trader will burn himself with the system. Why? Because he will get greedy, trade a size that's too large, and meanwhile there are very specific formulas how to control your trading size. Because if you start piling on risk, the quality of your trading is going to go down. And by the way, you mentioned mind, method, money. After several decades, they came up with the fourth M. How about that? Management, primarily self-management. And what I think is absolutely essential is keeping records. I sometimes say, show me a trader with good records, and I'll show you a good trader. Because by keeping high-quality records, not just writing down numbers, bought at 5, sold at 6, but keeping good quality records with charts, with explanations why you did this and did that, you insert a learning loop into your progress. You're not just chasing stocks or futures, but you're looking back at yourself. How did I buy? How did I sell? You become your own teacher. And so the self-management, record keeping, I believe is hugely important. We're having this interview in early April, and actually on my agenda for this week, I'm going to go through every single trade I closed in January. I'm going to pull up every closed trade. I'm going to pull up a current chart of where that stock or commodity stands today. And I'm going to draw a new chart with all the markings. And so the trade that I did is not going to be at the right edge. By now it's in the middle of the chart. And so I will see what I did right, what I did wrong. And this is how I learn from my own experience. And this is what I recommend. But hey, who's got the time? Let's go forward. Let's adjust stochastic.
Hey, let me keep you back at a moment where you were talking about the difference in variable. For example, we could be talking anything, but 21 and 22. And I had some questions the other day from somebody, and they were asking about ATR length, and they were asking about using an exponential or a simple moving average for the ATR. I'm always struck, and I want to hear your explanation for people to get them to think about the concept of robustness. But I'm always struck that smart people, when they first start to think about, let's say, technical analysis or trend following or systems trading, and they start to get this idea in their head of, okay, an indicator says to do this at level this, that they get so precise that it can only happen at that one variable. Now, of course, their application should be consistent, but the idea that they think it breaks and falls apart if it's not at that one precise point, I'm still a little surprised after all these years that's such a blind spot for a lot of people.
I absolutely agree with you. And actually, you used the term that I was going to say, robustness. Good systems are robust. Good methods are robust. Whether your moving average is 10, 11, 12, 13, it should give pretty much the same results. And if 11 works and 12 doesn't, well, you're using a wrong method. Toss it out the window, look for a new one. Good approaches are robust, and they allow for some, it's like driving a car. You can drive a Mercedes-Benz, or you can drive some 15-year-old Buick, or you can get behind the wheel of a Ferrari. As long as you know how to drive, you will drive them all about the same good. Why? Because of your personal skill. And this idea that if you only create a perfect system, the market will open up and start raining money on you. It's a delusion. It comes from weakness. It comes from thinking that you're not strong enough. Not you, but the client is not strong enough to make decisions. Well, I'm going to build a system that will make decisions for me. If this thing really worked, if this approach really worked, then the guy with the biggest computer would have owned the exchange by now. And it hasn't happened, because ultimately it's the human being who makes the decision.
Take me back in time. I want to know, as you lay out this wisdom on our show so far, what was the pivotal moment early in your career? I don't know if you've already been introduced to the trading bug by now, but what was the pivotal moment, the mentor, the book, the writing? What was the thing that broke you off in the direction to where you've become the guy you are today with your perspective, on the trading perspective?
Michael, I don't think there was a moment, there was a book, there was a mentor. It came slowly and through a lot of painful experiences and losing money. And sort of a combination of being stubborn. I was not going to give up. I hated to lose. And so I was going forward and making all these mistakes and losing. And eventually I figured out how to change myself. I wish it was a fast process. There was a guy in Chicago, he's been dead for quite a few years now. His name was Brian Monison, who said in an interview that high level of education is an obstacle to success in trading. He said, I have a PhD in mathematics, I specialized in cybernetics, but I was able to overcome these disadvantages and make money. I had those disadvantages. It took me an embarrassingly long time to overcome them. But overcome them I did just out of sheer cussedness, out of stubbornness.
Why do you say embarrassing?
Took a very long time. I wish it was. If I had a teacher like myself back in those days, I would have done it so much faster. So much faster. I did not have to spend so much time. I was discovering. I was reinventing the bicycle, and today I can show somebody how that bicycle is constructed, and they can ride it as long as they are prepared to put a little bit of time into practice.
You just mentioned, you said you hate to lose, you're stubborn. But that's kind of like an aspirational drive, big picture drive. But when it comes to your trading, for example, if your stop has been hit, you're not about hating to lose and you're not about being stubborn. You're taking that stop. Speak to, though, the big picture of you and this stubbornness and this hate to lose. And I'm not talking about trading right now. I'm talking more about you and how somebody can perhaps get inside your mind to see why that was ringing in there. Like, when did this hate to lose thing start? I assume when you were a kid.
I don't think so. I think it came a bit later. I think a turning point for me came, strangely enough, about a year after I came to the United States. I got a job as a research assistant at this medical center, psychiatric research center. They gave me, it was in the suburbs of New York, and they gave me a room in a dorm. I had a black and white TV. I had a car, a luxury. So I thought I was on top of the world. And then I came down with a cold, a nasty cold. And so I was laid up in my room for a few days. Nothing special. I just knew it was a simple cold. And my boss's secretary was coming over every day and bringing me chicken soup. Nice old fat woman who really liked me and sort of treated me very well. But I'm lying in bed. I can't really concentrate on any reading or anything. And so I did a lot of time thinking. And it suddenly occurred to me. I realized that back in the old country, I grew up in this successful family. And if I turned out to be a total bum, they would be chewing my ear off and they would be harassing me and this and that. But I would still have a roof over my head and 3 squares a day, all my life. And here I was in America. I didn't have a single relative here. I didn't have any support system. And I realized that if I do not function, there is nothing between me and the abyss. I can go down as low as possible. I realized it was all completely up to me. There was nobody to support me. And that was a very, very useful discovery.
Is there any color that you might like to share from that period that maybe you've not shared before about things that you had to do to survive, that you had to get ahead? I mean, even if it was something simple or basic or a type of job or something. I mean, because I think so many times today, the typical script in America, for example, is a young person grows up in the suburbs and, they go to college and they've got a big debt and they go party on and, drink a lot and this and that. And there's not a lot of risk really. It's just kind of a big country club type thing. So I would love for you to contrast, as you're sitting there thinking, my gosh, I could have stayed with the family. I could have had 3 squares a day. What did you have to go through at that moment in time?
I never thought I could stay with the family. I had enough of that family. I wanted to get away from the family. So I never thought. I think the decision to jump ship was the single best decision in my life.
Literally, you're talking about the literally jumping ship.
Well, figuratively, because I was on a shore leave with a group in Africa.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the best decision, and it was planned and it was executed.
But that time when you were in that dorm area, like what was and how long was this process going on? Because this is something most people are not really having to do today, this kind of struggle.
It was a few days. It was a few days when I was running a fever. I could not really concentrate on studying or reading or doing anything, and I was like lying in bed and thinking about where I was and where I would be. And I realized that if I do not function, if I do not do things for myself, there is absolutely nobody who will do things for me. And if I decide to take it easy, I can go down as deep as possible, and nobody will stop me. There was a great realization that it was me. It's up or down, basically. Years later when I had a friend who said to me in those days, Alex, one of these days you're going to be successful. You're going to be making $50,000 a year. And I said to him, well, what can you do with $50,000? Who needs so much money? But in any case, years later, I was practicing psychiatry, and I realized that some of my alcoholic patients, and I never had problems with alcohol. I would have a drink. To this day, I like a glass of wine, but never had a problem. But I realized that some of my alcoholic patients had the same thing. When their drinking got them to the point where they were at hitting rock bottom. Do I become a bum or do I turn my life around? And that's actually one of the themes in my first book that I wrote, Trading for a Living. It has a chapter, Lessons from AA, Lessons from Alcoholics Anonymous. You hit a rock bottom, you take a bunch of stupid trades, you take a bunch of impulsive trades, you destroy your account, and now you decide, you walk away from it forever, or you push away from rock bottom and start paddling up. I paddled up.
As you describe that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, bum or turn thy life around. This is always a personal choice, isn't it? It's always a personal choice. There's not, I'm thinking you just mentioned some alcoholic patients. Ultimately, those alcoholic patients, they could get all the treatment in the world, but it's going to be up to them if they want to stop. I think that's something that sometimes, at least from my perspective, not putting words in your mouth, from my perspective, it seems like we always think there's someone there that can fix it for us. But the reality is when you're in the middle of whatever that addiction might be, it's you, right?
You know how many psychiatrists it takes to change a light bulb? Only one. But the light bulb has got to want to change.
That's so tough for people to hear. What you just said there, you and I could break that apart. You could teach that sentence, you could teach for weeks and weeks, months, semesters, but so many people don't want to accept it.
I can teach it for months and weeks, or I can say to the guy, the single best step for you to improve your trading at this point today is to start keeping good records. Let me show you the format in which I keep my records. Feel free to change it, adapt it to your needs, but I'm giving you my format for keeping records. And I would like it to, let's say, for the next month, record every trade like that. After that, I'm going to teach you the next thing. I doubt that 1 person out of 10 will do that.
Even if they have a terrible system, you're just saying, hey, write it all down and let's see what you got.
Yeah. I have a friend, a former student, now a friend in Michigan, and she is a very successful option writer. And she is very kind of outgoing lady, so everybody knows what she is doing. And so she says people constantly come to her and say, and she said, oh, it's so easy. She says, I told my granddaughter, you're an artist. You look at patterns. I can teach you to write options. So people come to her and say, well, teach me. And she says, sure. I want you to keep records of option prices for this stock, of all option prices for the next month. Come back with a handwritten record. We'll take it from there. And she says that blows them all off. Nobody came back. To keep records by hand for a month ain't gonna happen. You have to have this toughness. You have to have this thing that I will work. I will change myself. And if somebody can do that, I can teach them. If they don't have that, well,
that was like the perfect like ending. Well, and then there's the death silence. So basically what Alex just said is that when that pause for 5 seconds, you just died in your trading world or something.
And most people, it's wonderful for people to lose money trading, because when I trade, where my profits are going to come from? They're going to come from people who are impulsive, undisciplined, and ignorant. Right? I'm not going to get any profits out of you. I'm going to get profits out of somebody who stumbles into the market and doesn't know anything about risk management, knows a few things about stochastic and moving average, and now he is out to beat me at the trading game. We need people like that. We need people like that to support the markets.
I can't keep you because I know you want to get on the slopes, but you just said something that struck me, where you passed judgment. You passed judgment. You talked about people that were impulsive and ignorant. Now, you didn't say it in a cocky way. You didn't say it that you're all that. And I was thinking about one of my very first questions in this conversation, what's changed? I think I might argue that one of the things that's changed is that for that person, Alexander Elder, when he says, hey, you are acting impulsively, that is ignorant. That is become something in society today for that person, you, that has that experience to offer that view. I think more people feel their egos are bruised today than perhaps past years, to hear that kind of stark advice.
Back when I was busy practicing psychiatry, a fairly typical sort of beginning of a case, a patient comes in. We sit in the armchairs opposite each other, and the patient says, the boss is an animal, the wife doesn't care, the kids talk to him only when they need money, and life is generally miserable. And I sit there listening, taking it all in, occasionally asking a little question, and the patient kind of slightly begins to relax. The patient, for the first time in a long time, somebody is listening to him. So we make the next appointment. He's coming for the second session, and there's initial evaluation, usually 2 sessions. He comes to the second session, and by now he feels more comfortable with me. He knows that somebody is listening, paying attention, serious. So he tells me more about the animal of a boss and the wife who doesn't care, And then there's a pause. And I say, a man walks down the street and a dog bites him. Oh, the patient now is nodding to me in compassion. He knows exactly what I mean and how it feels. The question I have, I say, there were 50 other men on the street. What signal did he give to the dog that he was okay to bite? And now the hook is in. Now we can talk.
I like that. That's why you have done in your career what you've done, to pass along that great piece of insight, to cause everybody to pause and go, I start to understand what it might be like just a little bit to be a psychiatrist. Hey, where can we send people, Alex? I know you're going to hit the slopes, but I want to send people to the website. Obviously, the classic book they should check out, Trading for a Living. There's new editions. There's other books. There's a ton of stuff. Go to Amazon. Where's the website where we can send people?
Michael, first of all, correction. There is a book, The New Trading for a Living. It was updated. The original book got updated 22 years later. So The New Trading for a Living is the latest. And I consider it my most important book. When the publisher finally prevailed on me to create that book, I budgeted 3 months of work for an update. Well, it took 18 months, and I almost completely rewrote the book. So it's The New Trading for a Living. And my website is very simple, elder.com. My last name.com. I got into the internet when short names were still available.
Hey, I have Covel.com. So I think that's the same number, letters. Yeah, there we go. Alex, go have fun on the slopes.
Thank you very much.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.